See it perfectly.
Awesome. Okay, so we're here. Welcome. And so let's start off with a cheers. Let's just start off on a good note. So I'll get my cafecito ready here. And cheers. Roman is calling all the way from Miami, and I'm in California. So you have a little bit of East Coast, West Coast here. And we both have, I think my background is Cuban. I know my background is Cuban. Roman, you are Cuban Venezuelan, no?
Yes, sir. Absolutely right. Arepas and croquetas all day.
Arepas and croquetas are also hallacas, pan de jamón, also awesome Venezuelan food. But I wanted to start with a little bit of who we are. My background is 10 years training and development. I've worked with some major companies, Food Network, Norwegian Cruise Line, Pepsi, as well as now with the Slide Genius is my company that I'm working with now. It's an amazing group of people here. Roman, you're going to also help me out with the chat here too, because I'm looking at my presentation only in the share method.
I will take care of it.
If anybody comes up in the chat, let me know. But I'm excited to bring all these training tools and tips. It really also came from the time during COVID where I worked with California Department of Public Health. So that's a little bit about my background. Roman, you want to tell them a little about your background?
I would love to. Good morning / good afternoon, everyone. I am Roman Corrales. Buenas tardes or buenos dias. I am indeed Cuban Venezuelan, and I have the voice and the volume of the voice to prove it. Professional background, been in technology in varying respects for over just about 20 years. Worked for pretty much larger companies. Ended up starting at Best Buy when I was younger. Ended up in corporate. Ran a tech camp for kids. To bring the underprivileged, underserved into technology, into STEM programs, to try to spark inspiration to enter those fields. Did that for a few years, traveling around the country. I've worked for big name companies such as Uber, Uber, but corporate side, not necessarily driving. But shout out to the Uber drivers out there. I worked for them. I currently work for Royal Caribbean as a cybersecurity professional. Technically, digital product and security operations is my title, but we call ourselves the Guardians. I've done everything from IT management to systems engineering to security to consulting. I'm also a streamer and gamer, which obviously explains the nerdy ambiance of my ethos here. I'm also thank you. I'm also a live music show host, and which is why I can fill for time. I can tell you a lot more, but we're not here for that. We're not here for myself for that. Check out my LinkedIn as well. For now, back to you, Richard.
Awesome. So we're going to go right into kind of what this came out of. This is a picture of my dad. A little bit about my roots here, cooking in the kitchen. This is very Cuban style. You have the rice cooker, you have the cafecito machine, the dog in the kitchen. So this is where this came out of, is the fact that, sometimes older Cuban men, they get very philosophical. And he was saying how you can use a lot of ingredients in your sofrito, and every culture has their own version of it. And you look at the bottom, at the top left is what sofrito looks like: peppers, garlic, and onions to that heritage. And then you look under it and use all these things you can add to it to zhuzh it up, to to make it your own. And I think that disfrazarlo is what we call it too. And what happens is that what he told me was that really it's these simple 3 ingredients that can make it great. And that's kind of what inspired the Training Sofrito today, which is talking a little about kind of our 3 keys to success in training, things that have worked for us. And I wanted to also share a personal story. On this next slide here, you can see that I was working with the California Department of Public Health during the pandemic, using my training background to support the different counties of California. And I had moved from Miami, Florida to California. And, I was part of this program that was made up of all of these state government workers, that 20% of all state government workers during the height of the pandemic had to go into COVID response. And that was just an amazing opportunity to be a part of that, and to be a part of the training of all of these people that came from all different walks of life. We're talking about people that were working in fish and wildlife, librarians that had to now learn about COVID contact tracing, a public health domain. I was hosting the LA Huddle, which was, I think we maxed out at about 1,000 people, and teaching them about what it was like to do contact tracing and work from home simultaneously. So we had to use a mix of platforms and digital tools and different social engagement so that they could bring back to their county and motivate this group of people. And you can see the impact that we had. I was doing a lot of diversity and inclusion. We're really helping out a lot of brothers and sisters in the Latino community. And you can see kind of the latest, right, coming out of California Public Health and how it's affected a lot of minority groups and Latinos specifically. And this is something where, I wanted to give back and really kind of tell you the story of some of the different platforms that we use, some digital tools that worked for us, and maybe it'll expose you to a lot of different things that you can bring to your own team. So we didn't come here to give stories about ourselves. We're here to talk about Sofrito business. So our primary ingredients is going to be platform. When I talk about communications platform, that's what we're talking about. Some video, but it also can incorporate other different elements as well. The software are all the tools that we'll be able to use in that space to make that better. And then the social is that engagement, the stuff that we bring into the presentation, the moderators, the facilitators that bring in that to make it more entertaining and fun. So that's going to be our Sofrito mix today. That'll be our base and our foundation. Are you ready, Roman?
You bet.
All right. So we're going to jump right in. We're going to take a bite out of the pepper like they do in Iron Chef and start with talking about communication platform. So this is internal and external. It's about channels, phone, video, conferencing, task management, team messaging, and the platforms like the pepper, because we usually only use maybe one or two different color peppers. There's about like 5 or 6 or 7 that might be available at the grocery store at any given time. But we really kind of got to choose one to make the dish the foundational piece. So let's talk about the platform. These are all different types of platforms if you're looking at it here. And we're going to just kind of briefly go over a few of them. You might have used a couple of these in your own personal space and then maybe started seeing them peek into the workplace. Maybe you're in a different industry. So the first one is Discord. And Roman, you know about Discord, right? Because Discord is very on the gamer side.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I can give you a short blurb. I do. Yeah. I mean, especially during the pandemic, I was coming out of almost a decade of being an MC, live in front of an audience, putting this energy out, right? And I've always been a gamer, always been, a nerd in my own right. Nothing wrong with that, of course. And I found myself wanting to kind of communicate and reach an audience somehow. So I really stepped up my streaming. And also to connect when I wasn't streaming, when I was offline, right? I did build a Discord community of gamers, we just like playing games. And it ended up evolving into this whole situation where all of a sudden now, about 100 plus people in the community from literally all over the world, all over, different walks of life, everywhere from, like people from England, people from South Africa, people from New Zealand, people in obviously Canada. We've got a bunch of different people from all over the world and all over and all these different views now connecting and having great times to the point where we'd have like video chat parties and celebrate birthdays while we were all shut into our own homes. I've celebrated New Year's Eve on Discord before with my community, and it's really a powerful platform.
Yeah, I mean, Discord is one of those things. I think my little brother got me into Discord because he wanted to watch a movie with me, and you could simultaneously comment and watch video at the same time and in a different kind of way. But it's starting to sneak into the workplace because it's now titled as a place for friends and coworkers. And another big platform that got a facelift was the one right under it, which was Google Meet. That's the new logo for Google Meet, by the way, and it used to be Google Hangouts. So throughout the pandemic, they recently changed that. On top of, and the next pillar, you're going to see Slack. So Slack is another great community where it has channels similar to Reddit. I'm really a big fan of Slack because it was able to really give us the opportunity to create our own emojis and create our own channels. And at my job, my current role, we actually use that in place of email for the majority of the time. Almost 80% of our communication is on Slack, and we can talk to different teams that are coming through that space internationally. So Slack was a really cool platform. I'm not sure if you've used that, Roman, in your...
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Slack is a huge part of my job. The real power behind it, and honestly, I wish my organization replaced email with it because, man. But Slack is super important and super crucial. I mean, you can obviously do your different categories and stack everything up and get notifications for that entire group of channels. We actually use it for monitoring. We have a lot of integration with that. Obviously, in the cybersecurity field or infosec, if you want to be technical, we prefer that term. We get monitoring from stuff like Splunk, etc. It really depends on your use case and what you need out of it. So we have like ticket plugins and all that. And I have certain channels that are just set to like all alerts no matter what, and I just get my pop-ups and I'll see that. I'll note switch my monitoring, and then okay, some big bad is trying to do something bad. Slack is indeed a very, very, very flexible platform that is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, the one under it is Skype. I'm pretty sure a lot of you have worked with Skype or have interacted with Skype. It's more of like an older platform, to some extent, in the sense that it came out before many of the other ones that we're talking about, but it still has a lot of user base. The center is a tool that maybe unless you've worked in the tech or training space, maybe you haven't come in contact with it. The first one is called Loom, and it's just an easier way to do one-way communication. Like if you wanted to go ahead and put your video, most people will just go to YouTube, make a video, and then share that with the company. But maybe you don't want a YouTube page because you get all those advertisements, a lot of the stuff around it that may not have anything to do with your company or the group that you want to connect with. So Loom makes it really easy to do that, but it's a one-way communication. The one under it, if you're in the tech space, you've probably seen this icon because this is the share screen. And Roman, I know you probably can talk a little bit more about this, the team viewer.
Oh yeah.
What's your experience with that?
Oh man, as the friendly neighborhood IT guy and the family IT guy and all that, it really does promote collaboration and communication. It has actually grown so much in the tech field over, I'd say, the past decade or so. I mean, I still run it now. I love TeamViewer, although there are more secure alternatives. As a cybersecurity professional, I do have to declare that. TeamViewer does have the market share. It is very easy to set up. It is what I would use with my family for like a one-off. Like, I got a virus in my computer. That is, no, Mom, that's not Microsoft trying to get into your computer. The IRS is not after you, but I'll go ahead and take a look and clean your computer out.
This is where like you have to go into Abuela's computer to fix it. This is the program.
It's got to the point where, like, at this point in my life, I show up to family events like Christmas. Oh, no, Noche Buena, for the most part. I show up like an hour or two early, and I'll just bring my flash drives. I'm like, all right, who wants free text service? Well, I think one of the secret hidden weapons behind TeamViewer that I really like for collaboration on the tech side will be the fact that you have the AR camera. So I don't know if you know about this, Richard, specifically, or if any of the rest of you do, but it's really useful when you're trying to guide somebody through and you feel like that person in the movie where it's like they're trying to defuse a bomb, right? And it's like, it's like, oh, do you see a red wire, or what wires do you see? I see a yellow wire and a red wire. Cut the yellow wire. So you can actually grab your phone and point it at what you're looking at. Let's say you're looking at wiring in the back of a computer, or you're in a server closet, right? Which I've actually used before. And you have this AR vision, so you can see on your phone what's on the camera, but the other side, that host can draw on the screen and tell you, okay, that's the one you want, or plug this in, and they can highlight stuff on the screen. So it is such a handy and useful technology to use for not only for collaboration, but really, I would say more execution than collaboration, really, because you get stuff done with it, and that is crucial.
Absolutely. The next pillar here we're going to look at is, some of the titans. You have Zoom and Teams. You got to be living under a rock if you haven't heard of those video platforms, because they've really kind of made a huge impact in the last 3 to 4 years within their own, industry. So the predominant force right now in video conferencing is Zoom, and then Teams is really the Microsoft version of that. They are very different. We're not going to dive into each individually, but I like kind of like skimming over a couple platforms just to introduce a couple new ones if you haven't seen. And maybe you haven't seen the new logo on it's the next pillar of the GoToMeeting. So that's the GoToMeeting's new logo. It came out a couple of weeks ago. And WebEx, which these are kind of the OG platforms of video conferencing. And if you're in big business or, corporation type settings, like they pretty much dominated the field before Zoom and Teams kind of took that over. So there's a lot of people on that platform. And I just wanted to just give you like a little overview of different platforms. We're encouraging you to like find a platform that works for your audience. And that's really the basis of this next slide here, where we're looking at the market share of the top video conferencing softwares of last year. You can see Zoom, Teams, WebEx. Viewer surprisingly made the list there with 8%, and Google. So look how it's dominating the video conferencing space, Zoom. So think about this when you're looking at picking or even trying a new platform, is that finding a platform that people already use is so, beneficial. Did you change platforms during 2020 or 2021, Roman, or anything like that?
Actually, yeah. So I would do a lot of, let's say like Facebook Messenger, a lot of FaceTime and all that. But, well, before 2020, of course.
Mhm.
But the thing is, I started rapidly realizing is as I was trying to, upgrade my streaming setup and, have all my lights and stuff, I'm like, man, do I really want to sit around and like hold my phone to my face and get that fatigue going, right? When
Yeah.
I've got a perfectly good webcam here and all that. So that was a big part of it. And also, through sheer necessity, because we were now shut away from the world, the world really started using Zoom because it's a very attractive platform, right?
Mhm.
Or has been. I mean, the irony of the fact that I had to go to a traffic court for a speeding ticket on an app called Zoom is not lost on me. I mean, that's incredible, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's amazing how we've made this shift and had the technology keep up with us.
Right.
To be able to communicate. And because I mean, I don't know, if COVID were, I would say we're about 20, 30 years sooner or earlier than what it was now. I don't know if we would be as adaptable as a society, to be truthful.
Right. And I think one of the things here to note is that, like, when we had to pivot in 2020, especially when I was working with the Department of Public Health, we had to figure it out, and we were on Teams first, then went to Zoom because of the participant count, and we were really experimenting. Some counties were using WebEx, others were using Meet. So if you want, this is like a really great thing I found that was within the education industry. But anybody who's a startup or bootstrapping or wants to do their own thing, this is kind of like the holy grail. You have the free plans, how long it is, the participants, and you'll notice that the live stream and the record, that's really what you're paying for in some of them, but some of them come with that. So they have their give and takes. So you got to find the right platform that works with your audience. But if you want to take a moment here to screenshot this is some really good stuff that you can take back to your company, to your group of people that you're either working with or even friends, and see which one you want that fits your needs. So I've stalled a little bit here so you take a quick screenshot, but you can always reach out to me. I'll put my LinkedIn at the end of the presentation, and I'll send you any of the slides that you have here. But I think it's pretty good, right? It's like the homework. I did the homework, Roman, for a lot of people here.
You got the receipts, buddy. Proud of you.
Yep. Thanks, Roman. So we'll go to the next one here, which is software, right? So our next ingredient here is software. Now we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this category because these are things that you can actively go to whatever platform, whether that your company uses or your friends are using, and then start to experiment with some of these different unique applications. They're digital tools. They're going to encourage that virtual meeting engagement. And also, it's like an onion because you only want to use this half the time. Right? You can't do the same application every meeting. It's going to be very predictable. You want to kind of spice it up, maybe try some things one time and then try something else. But you never want to use more than half an onion to make your sofrito anyways. So I kind of felt like it was fitting. Some of them are on the sweet side. Some of them may take a little bit of getting used to. So you got to really know when and how long to cook an application, especially if you're in a meeting. So let's go ahead and go into some of the ones that we'll dive into today. And I will dive into it a little further. So this is just to show you and kind of explain what some of these icons are. You might be familiar with some. Maybe during the pandemic, when everybody was just getting together and playing games or whatnot, maybe you experimented with a couple of these. But the first pillar is more about like polls and polling type applications. The second one is more gamification and game type presentation. The third column is more of this whiteboard interactive space. And the fourth one is kind of like some out of the box applications that we've used. We're going to dive right into it. So I want to go into this next slide here, which is really talking about the polling. Has anybody done polling before with their company and whatnot? Put in the chat what you're using, or if you've used any of these. Zoom polls tend to be really popular. And Roman, if they come in on the chat, let me know, because I can't really see the chat with the presentation.
I got
the
you,
way
buddy.
I'm
Don't worry.
presenting it. But it's Zoom polls is an easy way. You got to do a little bit of homework beforehand, because you got to set up the questions and you got to get the questions. But it'll show the percentage of the responses in real time. There's usually no lag whatsoever. And it's a really quick way to kind of mix it up a little bit and just learn about your audience, right? So Zoom polls is simple to use. You click on that icon on your Zoom settings, and you can really kind of get that started before the meeting starts. Now, if you want to kind of do some things that are a little bit more edgy, I'm not really saying do this, not this. It's just a different type of polling software. It's called Mentimeter. You could simultaneously log on your computer as much as you would on your phone, and you can vote. And as you vote, it in real time will create a graphic for you. It's really cool. You basically give everyone a code at the beginning of the meeting. They sign on to menti.com. They put in that code, and immediately their questions come up. It's very, very easy to use. But you can make these word clouds, and you can make these graphs that are just instantaneous. You will look so good in front of your boss or your coworkers, like, wow, they actually made a graph. Like, no, this does it all for you. And it's a really awesome way to kind of spice it up a little bit too. They also have a lot of different color schemes and ways that you can kind of like customize your graphs too. Not sure if you do any polling, Rome, especially with your audiences that you have.
Oh yeah,
social side.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, on the social side, it's absolutely. More popular would be, let's say, on the social media side. Let's say Twitter has a pretty good poll platform, but it's actually as simple as being on Twitch. And when you're streaming, if I'm streaming and I can choose from a number of different games, right? I can just put it up to my audience and be like, "Hey, what's up, chat? What should I play next?" And just put up a range of things to play, or maybe if I feel like I don't know, like having a beer on stream or something, like what kind of a beer should I have, or other such things. It's tools like Mentimeter, etc., or Zoom polls, what have you. When you get that audience interaction and that collaboration, you get instant feedback. We also use that in training as well. So we use that to kind of tee up the ball, so to speak. So we can kind of gauge what conceptions would be, or misconceptions rather, about a particular area of question. And so we can just have them do that, and then that would be our intro. So then also that data is useful because we know what people think right after that, because that data remains. Mm-hmm. So not only is it a tee up for the training to set it up for this set stage, now we have data that we know, okay, this is what most people think. And if we know that, then we can help protect against it too. Back to you, buddy.
Absolutely. And it's very like, you can quantify data, and it makes really an exciting way to like present it right away. So the next one here, I know this is more your forte, Roman, but I'm going to first talk about Kahoot, and I'll let you talk about Jackbox. But this is more that gamification piece. And I know I'm going to like date myself a little bit, but Kahoot reminds me of like when you had a clicker in class, like or like in college, and you had to like choose it. I might be dating myself. If anybody's used a clicker, like write in the chat so I don't feel too bad. But those you would click on your answer, and it's just an amazing way of like interacting and making it fun. It feels almost like, what's that game show, like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire or something like that, where you can kind of really, everybody feels like they're involved. And Kahoot's actually gotten really cool, where like you'll start seeing like the leaderboard, and after each question you'll see who's on first, second, third, and it's like an exciting way of doing it. But it feels very education school-like at the same time, in their design and the way that they're kind of structured. But it really will, especially if you want to bring that competitive nature to your team, like Kahoot is a great way of doing that. But yeah, that's Kahoot. And if anybody's used Kahoot or is a Kahoot fan, write it in the chat. Roman, you want to tell them about Jack in the Box or Jackbox games? Jack in the Box.
I love Jackbox.
is the what is it called? The fast food chain. I mean Jackbox.
Jack in the Box.
Jackbox.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
let's dive right into it. So obviously, as a streamer, right? Because I have a whole lot of love for my community. Because it tends to be like a party game, right? So these actually started as games when we were younger. Fun fact, Richard and everyone else in here, they actually started as what's called "You Don't Know Jack" as just trivia games, right?
I didn't know
Um,
that. I remember
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. They started as that, and then the logo with the guy's head in the box and all that, that stayed the same for ages. But yeah, it's called You Don't Know Jack, and then it's called Jack Box because there's several different games. It's not just trivia, right? Focused around like the party environment and collaboration with the community. During COVID, honestly, Jackbox, especially for stream too, has been one of the greatest hits and one of the most beloved series of games for us, where we would hop on a call, either video or voice chat, and we would have that up on screen. Me, because I'm obviously a nerd and have multiple monitors, I would have it right here. But we would all have this a fantastic time just hanging around and either having what would we call it? Safe for work, and we would be a little bit more tame, especially for stream. We wouldn't want to be too edgy, even though I personally curse a lot when I stream, but not in here. Hello.
Thank
But
you.
we
Thank
can.
you.
Yeah, no, you're very welcome, my friend. Gotta
Para la
keep it
familia.
pro.
Después de para la familia. Yeah.
Eso, sabe, niño bueno. Yo no quiero papá. No chancleta for me, please. But yeah, no, it was fun. Like we would have great fun. Quiplash has brought many a good time with the community. God, Trivia Murder Party was great. Drawful. The thing is, I'm not a strong like artist per se. I can do like digital graphics and all that, right? Graphic design. When it comes to the actual drawing stuff, I can do stick figures and like a potato that looks like a cat. But these are great games for collaboration, for just getting these visceral reactions, like those like belly laughs, that was largely lost during the pandemic
Yeah.
too, right? We couldn't have those
A
Fred
lot
nights
of
and those game nights.
Yeah, I mean, it brought a lot of that, fun, in a very kind of like challenging time for many people. So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a big fan of Jackbox games. I think that it helped a lot of people kind of get through the pandemic in some ways, and interacting with
Yeah.
friends in like a different way.
Yeah.
Let's go to our next one, which is, this is more, if you're on the science side or engineering, or these are it reminds me a little bit about AutoCAD, but it's cool because you can put your like sticky notes on there. Everybody can collaborate at the same time. You can move things around. You can make a web. You can move pictures. Like you can basically do anything you want in that space collaboratively. Where I think the first time we all kind of felt this was if we ever used Drive and you're like, oh, we can edit at the same time. But this is kind of like times 10 because you could do anything and move these objects with other people. Both of these platforms, Miro and Jamboard, both are, kind of similar, but they have their major differences. Miro, I think, because it's a little bit like less flashy, it has more user interaction. Like you can make templates, and people have made like really cool templates. Like how dark do you like your coffee, or how spicy do you like your food? And people can start taking their little like a little picture of themselves or a dot or something and move that, and then they can kind of show them like where you are in relation to the rest of your team, which I think is really cool. And our teams in Slide Genius use it, and it's a really great opportunity to do fun things as well as important things. I did a client journey chart with so many different departments, and we kind of showed the progress of like what's going on from this perspective and that perspective, and then this happens and that happens, and doing this like very elaborate timeline. So those are the types of things that you could do with Miro. And then Jamboard is basically the same thing, but the Google version. So it has a kind of a nicer interface, better images, but it doesn't have that freedom of the templates that Miro has. And it's one of those things where as you're putting things on the board, people can see you move them in real time. But there's another layer to it, which is also cool, especially if you want to do like HR or DEI stuff, where people can actually answer anonymously too. And it kind of presents that layer of anonymity, especially with Jamboard, that you don't really get with Miro. So you can do some things that you may want to do collaboratively, but also discreetly at the same time. Not sure if you have any experience with any of these, Roman, but these have been really cool, at least in my work setting.
Yeah. what's it called? The Miro is actually really useful. So I've always found it to be a marriage of digital whiteboard, which we've all, that's done and dusted, right? Like we've all know that. And so you get this like really cool marriage of a digital whiteboard, collaborative whiteboard, but you also marry what's called a mind map, right? So a lot of mind mapping software, you'll have, man, there's so much out there, which I know we're going to touch upon that too coming up. So I'm going to keep it light. But the fact that you have that be collaborative, that you have these layers to it. So if you're doing agile methodology, if you're doing
Oh yeah,
lean, for
that's
example,
fantastic.
and you're doing your Scrum stuff, you can do your Kanban boards, but you can also have just information linked to it, and you can have a commentary and stuff like that. So it's so feature rich that I absolutely love it. Like it's one of my
Yeah,
favorite tools.
it's one of those things where you got to like ease into it too, especially when we started to use this with California Department of Public Health. I think like my current company really was able to adapt very quickly to it, whereas like in other industries and fields that people are going, it's a lot to take on at the same time. So you kind of ease into it. I would say go in with like a friend or a coworker, try it out, and then bring it to the rest of the team, because there's just so much you can do that it's almost overwhelming. I would say.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Thank you for adding that. The last one here is just a couple of like for fun type things. I thought they were really kind of out of the box in their own way. MindMeister is a way to really kind of explore ideas together with a team. And you have these like large tentacles that come out of things, and you find swim lanes to talk about certain things. And it's really interesting in how one idea can lead to another idea, can lead to another idea. And so MindMeister is a good way of doing that. You get 2 free boards with a free version. Everything I've mentioned, by the way, is free, and nothing that I'm telling you is paid. So it's another great thing out of all of this, is that hopefully you'll learn about some new tools you can try out that at no cost, right? And then the other one here on this right side is called Wheel of Names, which is just this like really low tech 2D ridiculousness, where you could put your names, you could put pictures, and it's a wheel that you spin, and it randomizes and it presents a winner, and then confetti comes out on the screen. And when you share your screen, it brings like this different type of energy. You can use it to decide something. You could use it to start off a meeting as to who's speaking first. Like there's no rigging the system, so it's all very randomized, and it's just a good time. And it's a different way that you can it's a software you can interact with people and what they do next. So just wanted to go ahead and mention those. I'm not sure if you use any of these, Roman. These are kind of a little out
Yeah,
there.
yeah. Obviously as an engineer, because we are in a agile and lean methodology of what we do. We do continuous innovation, continuous development, right? um, or CI/CD for short. So because a part of CI/CD is just continuous feedback, and we have our projects going on, and on my team we have our primary work roles. Wow, sorry, but also we have our own projects, right? I have my own projects at work as well. I have my babies. So with this, instead of just having, let's say, like a Jira board, uh, where it's just, okay, I have a task or a Trello, and I'm like, okay, I'm working on this, right? It's a little sticker. With this, we can actually add on and have it be this like living network of things that you can see, not only for uh, organizational oversight, so you can see kind of the whole and zoom out and have this be visualized. So, okay, Roman's working on documentation. Roman's working on monitoring, creating new scripts, for example. I can then branch out on different sections of the mind map and on my side of it. And I can show, okay, I'm working on this, this, and this. And maybe I can indicate if there's a blocker, for example, or if there's a hold, if I need intervention from another team or information from another team. In the engineering world, mind maps are just like flow charts and et cetera. They're very crucial. And also you can make links between certain things. So if I'm going to collab with a team member on something they're doing, as I have been, I can create a link, like a symbolic link, and I can go, okay, so he and I are working on this project. You can see on the mind map that we're collaborating on this part. And therefore, if I have a blocker, it's going to reflect that on his too. It's incredibly useful once especially being a visual person.
Yeah,
It's incredibly useful to see the relationship between things. That is, oh man, that is one of my favorite things, is visualization. Oh,
it,
love it.
you can even use it like as an org chart or who's doing what on the project. Like it's
Hmm.
really interesting, and I would say try to do that. It's also especially like myself that I might have like a lot of ideas at one time. This is kind of like a good place to brain dump too, and just kind of see where some ideas are on a project or on
Hmm.
something that you care about. So these are all just really interesting tools that you can always bring in. And then I want to get to our last piece. I do want to give a little bit of time to maybe do a little Q&A. But the social engagement side, I think this is where Roman, you obviously shine in the social media space, but this is this communicating, engaging online piece that can be very difficult for people. And I think that this is kind of that extra spice. The reason why I think it's like garlic, because just like garlic, you don't want to use too much, right? You can't have a 30-minute icebreaker, right? So you want to sprinkle it in, but there are garlic lovers, right? So you gotta kind of find the right mix for your audience, right? So you gotta
Hmm.
it's using the right amount to make sure that you're actually engaging and you're not losing people. So that social piece could be some various different things, and I'll show you in the next slide what we mean by that. Which here are just a couple of ice, not to say icebreakers, but different ways you can socially engage at the top of the hour, maybe in the middle when you're losing steam, or even at the end to kind of have a nice ending to your meeting. So the first, I'm going to go through these different columns very quickly, and then I'm going to focus on three main ones that I think we can kind of riff off a little bit. And Roman, definitely
Yes.
feel free to chime in at any point, because there's always that introduction. A lot of people do tell me a little about yourself, truth and a lie, even these types of things where the people are just kind of stepping in. Sometimes we feel comfortable, sometimes they may not feel comfortable with just jumping right into an intro. But a lot of people tend to find that as the main way to introduce. And then there's also icebreakers, right? So the second one here is icebreakers. And icebreakers, I'm going to get into that a little bit more in depth. But icebreakers, there's their pros and cons, and you got to choose the right one. And there's so many different types. Trivia, you could use Kahoot, you could use different things to bring that trivia dynamic. And then the one to the right of that would be kind of bringing in the game, the wheel of names or something like that. Those are kind of the more, I guess you could say, unconventional of the conventionals. Like they have you have to put a little bit more effort than the ones below. Um, and then the ones below are like showing a video, or saying a quote or a fact or news or jumping right in. So usually when people don't want to do that first layer, they want to do the second layer because it's safe. What are your thoughts on that, Roman? How do you kind of show up in that social space?
Well, social kind of is my thing. It's weird, right? Different sides, different halves of the coin, because IRL, as we say. I've been a live music show host slash MC from the
Mm-hmm.
better part of a decade. So it's really interesting how you you don't have that long. I mean, first impressions can be made within, or and tone therefore can be set within what, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. I mean, first impressions are forever, and
Yeah.
you don't have long to hook an audience. I mean, Richard, yourself, you've been in improv,
Yeah,
you've been in
I
the
didn't
comedy
mention that.
side.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
I did
you've been in the
for like
comedy
5 years.
side.
It
Yeah,
wasn't like a little thing, but yeah, I did
yeah,
that for
you
a while.
don't, much like Eminem said, you only got one shot, right? One opportunity. We're not going to talk about the spaghetti, of course, but you do have that. You have very limited time to kind of just hook. It's when you have an audience in front of you, when you're in, whether an improv on your side or maybe live music like me, you're setting the tone overall in that moment. Whether it's your act and you're a comedian and your space and your time, and you set that tone, and you really have to hook that audience very quickly. Or if you're a host like myself, IRL, where I get in front of an audience and I literally have the responsibility of holding the hand
Yeah,
of the tone and energy for the night, right? But you have to just grab people's attention. Being Cuban, I know how to fill a room pretty well. That's not necessarily that difficult for me. But also, this translated interestingly into the not only the social space like online, let's say with streaming or social media in general. It does translate with, again, like, people are being flooded with so much content per day. How do you stand out from the crowd? How do you get the eyeballs, as we say, or how do you, and also how do you keep them there?
yeah,
because we've all been in boring classes as kids, right? Well, I fell asleep a couple times. I don't know about the rest of you guys. But when you have like really, hey man, ADHD, I'm medicated now, so that's great. I've learned my lesson somehow. But yeah, it's
Okay,
you,
we
you
shouldn't
really
publicly shame as Latinos. I'll take
no.
that back.
Yeah,
That was bad.
no,
Okay.
no, se puede. That's fine, dude.
No se
If it's not you,
Go
it's gonna
ahead.
be my own mother, so don't even worry about it. Uh, but no, it's you really don't have that long to kind of capture people. So, regardless, so it's not necessarily just about how you hook them; it's what follows up after you've got their attention. Because now, you're clapping, you're like, hey, look here, and they're looking
Right.
at you, but like now what? And that's where we're gonna move into next, of course.
Yeah, and I want to focus on these three social engagement pieces. The one is the icebreaker, because a lot of people they really depend on this one form, and it's got its pros and cons, right? The cons, it takes time. Sometimes it can be really awkward if you choose the wrong one, and not every meeting you got to choose the right icebreaker because it's not appropriate in some cases. So if it's something that teaches or motivates active learning, bringing new ideas, you want to focus on those things. Like try to stay on topic, but it's also used to bring energy and fun into the room. The one thing that I always tell people is use the chat, right? Like if you've used the chat in the beginning, it actively engages them to use the chat throughout the process. So I think it's also a really important piece where you can say, hey, what do you guys think about that? Go ahead and write it in the chat. Those things really help kind of break the ice. Even if you tell people, put an emoji of how you're feeling, those are the types of things that you get to, people can be a little vulnerable without having to sacrifice too much. But icebreakers, while they might be a little awkward, they can do a lot of good. So I don't know if you have any specific icebreakers that you use, Roman, to kind of get the to work the room, I guess, in the online space. I'll share a couple of mine.
So yeah, I'll go ahead and hop in. One of my favorites, and I use this in real life as much as I do professionally too. I like to be silly, right? Uh, life's too Life can be way too serious. Why should I be? Um, but one of my favorites, actually, surprisingly, because I love the reactions that come from this too, is when you come up to someone, or I'll mimic the audience, right, and I'll just kind of be like, "Hey, do any of you guys know the secret to the perfect high five?" In fact, Richard, do you know the secret to the perfect high five?
I do not. Does this translate
Ah,
online? Well, 'cause
well, I mean, yeah, kinda. But
well,
basically, I like to do things. I guess my approach is I like to break the ice, but I also like to inspire thought, or just to kind of be like,
true.
have someone go,
Yeah,
"Man,
that's good.
that's cool." So, for example, online, my icebreaker, like when I'm starting my streams, is I do what's called the beer of the stream. I'm a big beer guy, as I know you are as well, Richard. Um,
Mm.
and so I'll do a beer of the stream. So I'll kind of link to my Untapped. I'll have the actual beer. I'll cheers for chat and all that. And people will ask me questions like, "Hey, what kind of beer is that?" Or, "Man, that looks really good." Or, "Where's that from?" And it opens up the floor to get people kind of talking about, like, that maybe you like beer, and that's another reason for people to want to stay and hang out, right? To discuss
It,
beer. Go ahead.
yeah, it's to your audience. I mean, depending on like if your work is a happy hour, that's actually a really cool way of doing it. And they allow those things.
Yep.
I mean, if it could be simple, right, like that, or it could be, you could tell people like, what did you have for breakfast this morning, and that could just be this interesting way of like getting to know the person without having to share too much about their personal life. So those are different ways that you can just kind of lighten the mood and bring it in for a conversation. So um, the next one I think is that it's underutilized a bit is sharing a story. I think it speaks a lot to the nature of the presenter or the presentation. I think it would be a different presentation if I didn't start like with my roots and my dad in the kitchen and talking about what happened with California Department of Public Health. Those stories, I think, are what are captivating, right? And what we did in that public health forum is that we always had meet the trainer or meet the tracer at the end of the session, where they got to share about what they cared most about. They showed family pictures. It was kind of like sitting with them with a photo book, where you were kind of talking about your past, or scrolling through your old Facebook photos or something. And we were able to really learn a lot about the person, and people would stay around after the meeting just to connect and talk. So you want to tell these stories that appeal to the senses, that create the real characters, that really talk about the people in your stories, how you connect, Maybe they have a story that has data in it, like what I mentioned about the California Department of Public Health, or just like using analogies, comparisons, metaphors, making it really interesting, right? The whole presentation today is that Sofritos are really a metaphor for how three things come together really, really well to build a foundation. So you can see it building all those different components make a really great story. And I think it's really undervalued. It's just people being honest about their story. You know, I'm not sure if you want to add to that, Roman, or but I think that's a
Oh,
big piece, you know, of the puzzle is just people being vulnerable.
well, yeah, that's just it, right? If when you get to know me, for example, something I'm really big on is philosophically speaking, I'm a humanist, really. So I'm big on collaboration and communication and humanity. I believe in empathy and connecting with people. Try to remember the human in any given interaction, right? So it's when it comes to the social, when it comes to kind of appealing to people. Um, Actually, one of my favorite streamers, her tagline is "Kindness is free." And we should really keep that in mind. Like, obviously that in itself is a very powerful statement and a very powerful tagline. Um, but also, if you just think about that, just the ability to connect with people really kind of doesn't really come at much of a cost to you. How you do so is entirely up to you. How you appeal to the audience, right? How you paint the picture, how you bring people behind your eyes, so to speak, in a perspective as you tell stories. um, it's crucial, right? Because again, at the end of the day, we're not robots, we're not AI speaking to each other, right, in a vacuum, and nobody exists in a vacuum. No human is an island. So right now, you wonderful, people here that we're all in this chat, we're on this presentation right now, just like Richard and I are here. We're human. Last I checked, I'm human.
Yeah,
Um, and so we all do have our own life experience. We do have our own backgrounds, our own pasts, and our own future, right? So I think to kind of bring this down a little bit, like I think not bring it down, but just kind of land the plane. One of my favorite quotes, I believe it was Dave Grohl that said this from Foo Fighters. He said, "I can play a song to an audience of 10,000 different people, and that same song will be interpreted 10,000 different ways." If you
right.
really let that one rattle around your noggin for a bit, really think about that for a second. And I think that'll really kind of give you a perspective as to not only the responsibility we have to really consider and put thought behind our content and what we're putting forward, but also to remember that the power of what you're putting out there and the fact that we as humans are just collaborative creatures overall.
Right. And that's well said. I mean, I think that it really is a nice segue to kind of our last piece here, which is about, you know, expressing yourself, right? And telling your story can be very, you know, now in the digital world, you know, I think one of the most underutilized ways of expressing yourself is actually using emojis. You know, I think more and more people are bringing that, but in the corporate setting, it talks about the emotional intelligence of your company, you know, and my company, Slide Genius, they are so great at having a, and Rome corrected me yesterday. It's
GIF.
GIF, not GIF, right?
Oh
So
yeah.
we use GIFs, and we also I just feel like when I'm saying GIFs, like I'm trying to say gift in Spanish, you know. But
Yeah.
get
Ay, bro, me a
when
GIF. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So the gifs, the emojis. There's 3,300 emojis. So there's 3,000 ways of expressing yourself and combining those things. And I wanted to bring the story of Yingling Lu. So she is the one that she had to go through a long process to write. To basically get her emoji approved in the Unicode. Unicode is the emojis that exist in all platforms. So that means whether you're Microsoft or an Apple, those are the emojis that carry over. And there's 3,300 of those. She was the one that created the dumpling one because she didn't see that her culture was represented in that emoji, and she had a passion for dumplings, she had a passion for her culture, and she brought it up to the board, and they approved it. And what came out of that, she realized that the dumpling looks like a different food to different cultures, right? And for the Latino culture, it looked a lot like an empanada, and so the empanada emoji was born. And those are the types of things that are rich in culture that we kind of take for granted. So it's like sometimes we double think, should I put that? Should I not put that? And that's something you got to be careful, especially with with GIFs and with emojis and with memes is that you got to make sure that they're in a respectful tone. But I think it brings so much more character into the workplace. And I'm lucky that in my company that uses Slack, they have the ability that we have our own emojis, we have our own emoji culture. Different teams have different kind of inside jokes, and all of a sudden we've kind of created our own language by bringing that element into our text. And I think it's beautiful. So I don't know if you are using those in your workplace, but I encourage you guys to use emojis whenever possible. Anything there, Roman, about
Oh
GIF
yeah.
culture, emoji culture?
Oh, for sure. For one, I mean, it's funny that you were talking about the empanada versus the dumpling, right? Because you also have pierogi,
Right.
xiaolong bao, which are the soup dumplings, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just kind of the same thing. Like, what was that line? Same, but different.
But
And
different. Right.
it's really cool that I actually swear I didn't see that coming. I really didn't. I'm not as slick as I may seem with that. But when I was talking about the interpretation of from Dave Grohl, like the song to 10,000 different people is interpreted 10,000 different ways. Again, that was a perfect kind of like a
Right.
slide
Segue,
to follow up with, right? Segue. Thank
for
you.
sure.
And not the wobbly two-wheeled object that I fell on my face once on in
Right.
California.
Right.
But yeah, it's really cool how one person's empanada is another person's
Dumpling.
dumpling, and it's again, it's really cool how we've actually almost kind of gone back and we've gone almost full circle by way of communication. Because remember, we came from times where we had cave paintings and pictographs and
Mhm.
other
True.
ways of
Hieroglyphics.
knowledge,
Right.
right, and expression. So those, I mean, obviously those are the OG of the OGest emoji,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because that's
The
how we would
OG
dispel.
emoji. Yeah, for
Hey,
sure.
yo, nice one. Very nice. That was a great one, Richard.
So
OG Moji.
yeah, so
But yeah,
I think we started with sofrito and we made an empanada. So we're at
yeah.
the end of our session here, and I want to give some time for any questions in the chat and whatnot. But I really want to thank you all for being a part of our training sofrito today. I'm going to open up the chat here and stop sharing my screen to see your faces, and really just talk a little with anyone here in the last 2 minutes about maybe what has come up within the presentation that you liked, or maybe you have any questions. I know that we're coming from two different industries, and hopefully you learned something. So if there's anything you want to discuss in the chat, I always want to like leave it open if anybody wants to mention some things here. I see Camilo. I miss Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Absolutely, I think Regis Philbin brought it back in the day. But I do think that it's a great opportunity to kind of like learn from each other and to continue that process of like communication, whether it's platform, digital, and whatnot that we bring to that space. So
Hmm.
thank you all for your time. Thanks for sharing the space with us. And I think I want to close it the way you were talking the other day, that cafecito is, since it's a cafecito session.
Yep.
Roman, you said that if
So,
it's
yep. So,
either,
okay.
go ahead, do it, take it away.
Yeah, no, listen, if you're Hispanic, especially in the Miami area, et cetera, we always know that sometimes you just want to chill and you want to have the cafecito at the ventanita, right? You want to be at the little window with the old Cuban lady, and you just want to hang out and have your cafecito at the window and enjoy the wind, or usually if you're in Westchester, the cars speeding by and the old people yelling at each other. Or sometimes you got to take your cafecito to go, and you kind of have in your little cup, and you bring that with you. But we sincerely hope that whether you enjoyed this right now, and and you kind of got to collaborate and have a great time with us here, we do hope that you have that little bit of a to-go cup for the cafecito, for the colada, and you bring that with you, and that you learned something new today, and at least we made you think about collaboration and communication in this social space we're in right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Roman. Thank you for all that are being here, and have a great day. Thank you, guys.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks.
Be excellent
Thanks,
to each
everyone.
other. Hasta
Bye
luego.
bye. Hasta luego.